Hey guys, this is Ron. So before we get into the actual code, I'd like to talk a little bit about your development environment. I think if you start on the right foot with a good editor or a good IDE, it's going to pay dividends later on in your coding experience. So there's a lot of opinions about what's the best editor, what's the best IDE, and really the difference between the two has to do with the IDE has more advanced functionalities. It might support debugging. It might support the integration of Git. It might support uploading your code to wherever you choose. So there's extra functionalities that are built in that kind of sets it apart from just being a standard editor. Now for Python is an interpreted language, so we don't have to worry about compiling and some of those other advanced functions. However, debugging can be useful. Definitely integration with Git can be very useful. So it's up to you whether you want a full-blown IDE experience or just a text editor. I find with smaller projects, I tend to just use a text editor. But if I'm coding with other people, if I'm coding larger projects, I may tend to use more of the IDEs, okay? Now on the Python wiki here, it points out quite a few different IDEs, and you're more than welcome to come and check them out, read about them, and make a choice from there. I did highlight idle right here in the center. Idle is built into Python. It is great for checking out a little bit of code, checking out the functionality with it. As you're testing things, maybe as you're learning the language, but you're not actually coding your projects here. It's great for looking at documentation, checking out what a function does, but again, you're not writing your scripts here. You are just testing things out, trying out things. You're actually going to use a real editor or a real IDE in order to do that. Now we'll see idle quite a bit in this tutorial only because I think it's good for the learning experience. But again, as you start coding your projects, man, just use a good editor, a good text editor, and you'll be just fine. I did want to point out a couple of editors only because of their frequency that I end up seeing them. Then we'll kind of get into what I think has to be in at least an editor in order for me to use it. So Sublime Text is out there, and I've run into it more because of some of my Mac friends. So I don't know what it is about the Mac or about Sublime in general, but maybe it just has to be that they tend to code together and they all think somewhat the same. I don't know, but most of the Mac users I've run into tend to use Sublime, and from what I could tell, it's a good little editor. You may have to put some money into it, not 100% sure, but definitely worth checking out. You've got Atom here. I've heard a couple people talk about it. Obviously there's downloads here for .deb and .rpm, so your Debian and your Red Hat distros are going to be supported. So it looks to me like it's more of a Linux type editor. Looks like it supports any of the kind of functionality that I would be looking for in an editor. So you're more than welcome to give it a try. I've personally not tried it yet. I have tried PyCharm when I was first starting out. A good little editor. Also has some intelligence built in for some autocomplete, this and that. Not functionality that I necessarily need, but functionality that comes in handy from time to time. So I'd suggest looking at it. If you're new to Python, it might be value added to have some of that intelligence built in. If you're in the Windows world, Notepad by itself is very limited. It's very plain when it comes to what it can do. So if you want that kind of interface but yet want some of the more advanced functionalities, I'd suggest looking at Notepad++. It's been around for quite a while. I've used it quite a bit. It does support many different languages and markups, so you're going to find some of the advanced functionalities that you would find in other editors, but it's still a very kind of simple interface to use, so I suggest looking at it. Now if you're looking for more of a full-blown IDE and you're in the Windows world, I have used Visual Studio Community. So you can download this for free from what I remember from Microsoft. It supports, debugging and a whole slew of other features and languages. You have to do a couple little things to get it to work with Python out of the box, but it's very easy. There's a lot of documentation online, and Microsoft itself, through some of their development series, has put together some really good tutorials and videos on how to use Python in Visual Studio. So I'd suggest kind of looking at it. For me, again, there's only a couple of key things that I'm looking for out of an editor. So I'll bring up Kate right here. It happens to be what I have installed at the moment. So I brought up a piece of my code, and one thing that should jump out you right at the beginning is there's all sorts of different colors, right? So we're talking syntax highlighting. So keywords in Python jump out. And so you see this for, if, else, you see a return up here. Those jump out right away as being keywords in Python. And they become really useful in your editor to kind of tell if you made a mistake in mistyping a keyword, or maybe you assigned a variable name and didn't realize that name was also a keyword. So it's going to key you into that right away and let you know that you've made a mistake. So you don't have to wait until you run your program to find out that you've done something incorrect. Another feature that I always look for in an editor is indentation. So Python is real. They're kind of a stickler about your indentation. So some of the other languages in like a for loop like this would have, let's say, an opening squirrely bracket and then a closing one at the end. And so everything between those two brackets is a part of that code block. In Python, you don't have that. They tried to make it more readable, and so they forced you to use indentation. And so to me, again, it makes it more readable. When you look at it, you can really tell that, okay, for this for loop, until that indentation changes, everything in between here is a part of that for loop block, right? So it's important that we get the indentation done correctly, and we need to choose a standard. So amongst Python, we typically see 4 spaces is an indentation, okay? And so as long as you use 4 spaces in your code should be compatible, at least indentation wise, with other people's code. So now you can import their code into yours and vice versa. Now, if you don't get this correct, Python's gonna throw a fit because it's not gonna quite understand. So your editors typically take that into consideration and understand it. So for Kate here, I use spaces instead of tabs, and I always use 4, right? So whenever it's indenting, it's always going to use 4, and so it keeps that standardized throughout all of my code. And equally, if I'm gonna write another line in this if statement and I hit enter, what I don't want to see is it jumps all the way back here, and then I gotta hit spaces, and then I have to hit more spaces, and then I have to hit more spaces to keep things lined up, because eventually I'm gonna miscount, or I'm not gonna get something lined up correctly, and Python again is gonna throw a fit. So the fact that it realizes I'm already indented to this level and starts the next line at that indentation is very valuable to me, and speeds up the my ability to write code. So the last thing I'd like to point out as far as an editor is bracket highlighting. So look at this join statement here. So we'll talk about what this does later on in the as we start coding. But if you notice, there's lots of opening brackets and there's even some closing brackets, and it can get very confusing as to well, how many closing brackets do I need? Where do my closing brackets need to be? Well, some of these editors, just by placing your cursor next to one of them, it automatically highlights the other bracket. So this closing bracket corresponds to this opening bracket. And so as we go throughout the code, what we'll find is, okay, so this closing bracket is for this opening bracket. And if I put it here, this closing bracket is for this opening bracket. And so you can quickly kind of eyeball, do I have enough brackets in here? Are the brackets placed in the right spaces? So on and so forth. And so again, you can eliminate some troubleshooting time later on because you jacked something up along the way. So that's pretty much it. Just wanted to point out a couple of those key features that I think are valuable in any editor. Obviously, there's lots of different editors and IDEs out there. Which one you choose is really up to you. I'm not that particular. Again, as long as it supports syntax highlighting, auto indentation, I can use spaces instead of tabs, and it does bracket highlighting for me. I know for me, I'm going to be able to write code there rather easily. So just make sure you choose something that also does some of those same things, and I think you'll be fine as well. So now I'm excited to get into the code. I'm ready to start actually walking through Python itself, and I hope you are too. So thanks for watching. Bye.